Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you're listening to us. Thank you very much for joining this webinar, which is one of our webinars in the course of the Partnership for Action on Computing Equipment. Before we start with the substantial presentation, I would like to give you a brief introduction to our partnership and in which context these webinars are organized. The e-waste issue is a priority under the Basel Convention and was first addressed in its Conference of Parties in 2002. In the Conference of Parties in Nairobi in 2006, the parties adopted the Nairobi Declaration on environmentally sound management of e-waste, which focused on the theme of creating innovative solutions for the environmentally sound management of electronic waste. The Partnership for Action on Computing Equipment was launched at the Conference of Parties in Bali, Indonesia in June 2008. This partnership was formed with several stakeholders, including personal computer manufacturers and recycling companies, international organizations, academia, environmental groups, and of course representatives from governments. And by now, TES has a membership of 25 parties and signatories to the Basel Convention, 11 Basel Convention regional centers, 9 research and academic institutions and UN bodies, and 15 non-governmental organizations, companies, and industry associations. Here is the picture from our last meeting in South Africa, which took place in September this year. The mission statement for the partnership is to increase environmentally sound management of used and end-of-life computing equipment, taking into account social responsibility, sustainable development, and promoting information sharing on life cycle thinking. So quite important to mention the scope of this partnership is personal computers and associated displays, printers, and peripherals, but not all kinds of e-waste, what we normally subsume under the topic e-waste. That means refrigerators or electrical equipment, household equipment is not covered. So under this partnership, we are focusing on computing equipment. The partnership has developed several tools and guidelines on the environmentally sound refurbishment and repair of used computing equipment, environmentally sound recycling and material recovery of end-of-life computing equipment, but is also carrying out a number of pilot projects and raises awareness and has a training program. And one part of this training program is a set of webinars, and one of these webinars we are actually running today. We are very happy that you joined in this webinar today. Until now, the partnership has already developed guidance documents on environmentally sound management of used and end-of-life computing equipment, setting the scene for the overall management of these equipment, but also 2 specialized guidelines, one on environmentally sound testing, refurbishment, and repair, and the other one on material recovery and recycling of end-of-life computing equipment. So today we are focusing on material recycling and material recovery and recycling. If you want to download any of the TES documents, please visit our website. I understand this presentation will be made available to all participants in the end of the webinar, so you can then copy-paste from this last slide. And with that, I would like to close my introduction to the partnership and hand over the floor to our main presenter, Wen Ling. Thank you.
Wen Ling, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Yes, I can hear you, but I can just a moment. Okay. So, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much. Welcome to everybody to today's presentation, E-waste material recovery and recycling, an example of concrete solutions in Asia. I'm Wen Ling from IER. It's my pleasure to share our experience. And because before my presentation, I'd like to raise one point. Because there was an acoustic problem during my presentation last time in September. So to reduce the possible negative effects, I will provide some content in writing during the meeting today. Okay, let's start. My presentation starts with the past history about the problem due to U.S. import to my hometown. As many people live on dismantling U.S. in my hometown at that time. So I'd like to take some time to explain how we solve the problem, and it will be our first key point today. And second, I will talk about our e-waste management, both of municipal waste and industrial waste. Finally, I'd like to give you a flavor about our current status shortly as conclusion. Okay, around 1945, there were a large disposal of warships and waste military equipment imported to my hometown. People started to earn money from ship breaking in order to get metal scraps and especially metal parts. And also they start to dismantle e-waste. Around 1965, open burning and the acid picking of e-waste were quite often to see. No wonder one river near Kaohsiung City named the Erden River was damaged. And from 1970, the damage of Erden River raised attention to the public. But in the meanwhile, there were a lot vested interest from e-waste business. So that means we had some problem between economics and the environment, as I think everywhere in the world. That show you some statistics about 1988. The e-waste import amount was about 600,000 tons, while domestic e-waste was about 100,000 tons per year. So that means the amount of import e-waste is 6 times more than the domestic e-waste. Okay. The value of e-waste business was about $200 million US, really a large amount. And the employees were about 18,000 people. that means if you think about the family to the employees, that was about 80,000 people live on that. This is the reason why the government, they want to do something, but it was difficult to do something. So until 1984, the Dafa and the Wanli scrap metal industrial parks, they was first established. That means about more than 10 years later, as the people find the damage of the Erdene River. So, and the idea, just a moment. Okay. And the idea about the scrap metal industrial parks is to put the e-waste treatment in specified or limited area for easier management, and to limit the damage not everywhere in my hometown, but in that specified area, namely the mentioned Dafa and the Wanli scrap metal industrial parks. And this slide is a permit application process for getting scrap to the assigned scrap metal industrial parks. And in this slide, we have 3 key points as below. First, the application process itself, which needs different governmental departments to work together and very closely. And sometimes very difficult to do that. And we were very happy that we can do that. Second, it works based on the classification and the quota regulation. We will talk about the classification later on, more details in the next slide. And third, import shipment is only allowed to specified ports. If you see the button, you see that. And I think not to every port. This measure maybe is not convenient for the shipment, but it makes the measure also easier for the scrap metal. And in this slide, you see we set the permit application process. And the key point here is the 3 class for managed e-waste import. For example, for class A, the shipment into this industry park is not so, the regulation for that is not so tight. And for the classes B1 and the B2, there are some process for this kind of e-waste. And if the e-waste is belong to the class B3, there was import ban in my hometown. And in this slide shows you more details about the classification, which depends on the treatment capacity and the relevant environmental impacts, including, for example, air pollution, water pollution, and waste problems. For example, if you see B2, waste contains combustibles such as plastic, rubber, recycled. So if the e-waste contains such material, the recycling process may include burning or chemical methods. So we have to do some inspection by the authority. So if you think the concrete items, it might be copper wires or some waste computer or waste motor, for example. And here we see two photos in the 1980s in my hometown. The first is dioxin smoke near Iron River, and the second is the Dafa incinerator. Actually, I have to tell you the truth. If you see, I think many of you have visited incinerator. This picture shows really very simple one, and as far as I know, it was a demo one. It was not really functional. Things from, if you just see from pure technical point of view, it was not good enough as a incinerator. So, but why I show you this picture, I just want to show you, you can imagine there was always debate between economic side and environmental side. So you can imagine also there were many debates on the table and the pressures for the environmental enforcement. In this slide, you see two different times, and one is in 1989, and this is very clear. It was a trace of acid pickling in the so-called illegal plant, and one is 17 years later, and you see here are environmental volunteers supervising the water quality from the Urban River. So, and my question would be, or I want to raise one point. What is the main difference? Here is pollutant. I think here still some, because it was history from the past history. We know that it is damaged, but I think the most important difference between the two is in 1989, the public, they are not aware of the environmental protection. But nowadays, the people in my hometown, they are aware of that. I think it is very, very important, because I think in every country it's the same. The government is, they don't have so much resources. The resource of government is quite limited. So we need public as so-called environmental volunteers to join and to protect our environment. So, okay, let's start from the to the second part in my presentation. Around 1995, domestic e-waste become more and more. So there was necessary for us to set up infrastructure to manage the e-waste. And then here is, we start from the municipal waste, solid waste. This is so-called a 4-in-1 recycling program. You see here is community residents, they have to do something. You see the recycling fund, we have steps that, and you see we have recycling industry and also local authority. And here it's very complete, and I think the keyword for this slide is integration. Integration from different kinds of stakeholders is very, very important. And just one point I want to mention, relative technical but also very essential, is this part. Because as we like to begin with the so-called 4-in-1 recycling program, there was some how to say, resistant force from local authority, because some stuff they don't want to have more and more works. They don't want to have to collect waste and still recyclables, because before that they don't have to do that, and the market will do that freely if the residue value of the US is high. So we have to have some economic incentive for local authority to do that. That is that about 30% from the revenue from the selling recyclables can and must feedback to the local authority. I think this is a key point why this program proceeds very successfully. And just here, this is just an overview about the recycling fund. First of all, the so-called EPR principle must be accepted. No matter the EPR, the P is producer or product. Second is the fund established. In EU and Japan, there might be funds for that in some countries, as in EU countries, and mostly they are managed by producers, but the fund here is managed by government. And third, the collection and the recycling system are very essential, and they are still very many details about the operation. For example, you see here the recycling fee. So, and how to decide the fee, the value, how is that? And can we have some different if the product for the fee to promote the green product? Which producer should pay or not for, or let's say, how to define the scope? PC, we have to collect that. And how about industrial computer? So there are really very many details about the fund itself and its operation. But because of the time limit, if you have any question, please let me know, and I can provide further information about that. In this slide, I'd like to give you some information. Okay. The so-called dual recycling items of US in my hometown, we don't start it with all the US items like EU system, European system. Instead, we started collection and recycling with the most popular items, also the big ones for family, like TV set, refrigerator, washing machine, and air conditioner and computer. And I think there are pro and contras for EU or our system. Maybe we can discuss that later on. And so far, I've talked about the e-waste generated from family or municipal waste. And we are going to talk about the way about industry waste management. In this slide, in the middle, you see the time. So, and you see from different time, the management key point is a little bit different. And but in the reality, before the middle 90s, we use the manifest in writing. And after that, we have established an industrial waste control center. And so we have online system. So we don't use the manifest in writing anymore. That is the main difference from the different time frame. And for the industrial waste management, each party have to comply with the following requirements. I think here is relatively clear. Everybody have to apply for a permit, or they have to provide some report, or also they have to keep some operational records. Okay. And because of some efforts, and now about, I think this data here is maybe 1 or 2 years ago, the industrial waste recycling rate in my hometown is more than 80%. Okay, so my last part for my presentation, I'd like to share with you some recent measures. For example, except the mentioned 4-in-1 system or mandatory recycling system with the recycling fund, we still have other systems or other examples. For example, we do that for mobile phone recycling with voluntary agreement, and the EPA, they sign voluntary MOU with some producers, and also with some distributors, and also with some telecommunication operators. And the whole social cost is not so high like the mandatory ones. And second, because many people, they have problem to pay back for the large ones, so we have so-called WEEE take back policy for the public. They have one more collection channel to the recycling fund, and to do that more properly and also easily. So, and it needs the cooperation with especially the whole distributors. And in the in my presentation, page 12, you see that our last new, maybe I show you that very quickly. Here, from different time, we have add some items to the due recycled items, and the last time for light is 2008. And this year we get that to add some little more for tablet or external hard drives or some other lamps this year in August. And it from 2008 to this year's about 5 and 6 years. This takes really time because the resistance force from private sector to add new due recycled items is relatively large. Okay, here is just one result of the US recycling system, and here you see the collection rate. My question, or just to think about why the collection rate of IT equipment is smaller than home appliance and smaller than lamps. I think one reason is the how to say residue value of waste IT equipment. So that means there are more recyclers on the market. They don't need a subsidy from the fund, recycling fund. Okay. So to end of my presentation, we've talked about the past, how we face the problem due to imported waste, and then we talk about how we face a problem due to domestic e-waste, namely the 4-in-1 recycling program. And then also I described some shortly about the current status like MOU, which is not mandatory recycling system, but is on future. I think mainly is especially for IER, we are drafting so-called sustainable material management, which for my hometown, and the waste is no more waste but resource, and which is or we say another way, waste is resource which is just not in correct places. Okay, so we hope we can share some experience about some EPR more in details or SMM in the near future. And thank you very much for your attention, and thank you.